big book ideas off the pages and into your life. So you can go from just reading about it to being about it. I'm author, entrepreneur, and raging book nerd, Erin King, and today we are talking to one of my favorite people, author of Fear is My Homeboy, Judi Holler, on how you can get a better handle on fearing your fears less. Judi, welcome to Highlights.
Oh, I am so honored to be here. And I have to tell you, I wore my palm trees for you today. So this
It's so
is me
good.
channeling. I'm not in pajamas, although it looks like pajamas. Okay,
It
so for
looks
those of you
adorable.
listening, if you're listening, you can't see this, but imagine I'm in a fuchsia, magenta, comfy shirt. It's got a little V-neck, but it's got all these like really cute palm trees all over it. And so Erin's a Cali girl. I had to do it.
It looks so good. And I'm just making sure that we are actually streaming.
We want to make sure
Yeah,
we're
here we go.
streaming. We
Okay,
kind of want to
cool.
make sure we have a stream.
We have a stream. So we are talking about fear in the middle of a pandemic. Now, being a fear expert in the middle of a pandemic, it feels a little bit to me like how probably a cold beer vendor feels in a boiling hot, sticky stadium back in the before times. You're selling what everyone wants, and you know you have what everyone needs. And so just in these times, I have so much I want to talk about with you on this podcast. From my personal experience, when this pandemic started, you completely helped coach me through my fears. And I know in your tribe, which she calls her fear bosses, her Fear Boss community, on your social media, on your emails, every Friday, your book, you are constantly showing up and helping people to be bolder and braver and more courageous. And I've experienced it firsthand. So everyone watching, you are in for a treat. We have so much to talk about, but I want to talk about how we can identify and manage our fears. I want to talk about the difference between unhealthy and healthy fears and how to deal with this constant sort of background fear that we're having now. Before we get into all of that, here's my question. Okay. I want to get very real. What is your biggest fear and how do you go about fearing it less?
My biggest fear. Oh, let me count the ways. Oh, doctors, spiders, elevators, water, the ocean. Like, what is Judi Holler not afraid of? Like, I'm afraid of everything. But I think my biggest fear, if I were to really answer that question, like sincerely, it is always regret. Always. And so I am always like, my fear meter is always kind of measuring that. Like, I'm always making the joke, like, dude, you do not need to jump out of a plane to be brave. If you don't want to jump out of a plane, don't jump out of a plane. But if you're going to regret someday when you're on your deathbed and it's the end of your life that you never jumped out of the plane, you got to jump out of the plane. Like, you don't need to get a tattoo to prove to the world that you're brave. But if you would regret not getting the tattoo, you go get the tattoo. So again, and we can talk about what courage looks like in big and small ways. I am always like, my fear meter is regret. Okay. And I'm always like terrified that I'm going to regret something. So this is why I move. This is why I go. This is why I jump. And the license plate on my car says, take a risk. Like, let's go. Let's go. And, the second part to your question, so like my big fear is regret, and how do I fear that less, is by walking into the discomfort zone regularly on purpose, and that's how I get braver and stronger.
Okay, so talking about your comfort zone, and for those of you who have not read Fear is My Homeboy, this book is full of gems, and my favorite truth in the whole book is that it's not about being fearless, it's about fearing less. And that is such a truth bomb. When I read that in this book, I stopped in my tracks and I got chills. And so this podcast is about taking the ideas from books and bringing them into our lives. So we don't just read it and think, oh, that sounds good, that felt good. But how do we actually be about it? And so what I want to talk about with what you just said with the comfort zone is, fear for a lot of us used to be something that would happen with isolated incidents. Maybe someone would have a health scare. Perhaps we were looking to ask for a promotion, or we were putting ourselves out there romantically or professionally, or maybe for us as former keynote speakers in real life, we used to be scared if we went on stage. And so for me, fear and people that are listening, it was based on different isolated events in our life. And now I don't know how everyone listening feels, but it seems like there is this sort of a lower level constant presence of fear, like this sneaky ninja background, like lurky fear that is present constantly instead of big fears in little spurts. And so this pandemic has really taken pretty much all of us out of our comfort zones or into a comfort zone in our homes that is maybe out of our comfort zone in normal times. And so I guess if we're thinking about intentionally shifting, what that means for us, how do we better process this new kind of brand of fear that we're all living through collectively?
Yeah, so good. Such a beautiful question and such a relevant question. So I think it's only appropriate that I begin with the disclaimer that I am not a doctor. I am not a psychotherapist. I am not a therapist. I have no medical degree. But what I am is a big old fraidy cat who faces fear every single day, just like you. And I have walked it. And I'm always thinking about this idea that, you think about the people you read and watch and study, these people you look up to and admire. Someone once said to me, if you want to know what keeps them up at night, read their work, read what they write about. And so I'm always sort of creating what I too need. And, my perspective on facing fear and addressing fear, no matter what kind of brand of fear it is, and no matter what circumstance may be going on in life, is through the lens of an improviser. So it's important to note that my work on fear is really inspired by what I learned studying improv theater at Second City in Chicago. I'm a professionally trained improviser. So that's my twist. That's what makes my work on fear and my perspective on fear unique. And that has bled into my life. So the way I look at fear, whether it's a pandemic or not, it is a part of life. And a lot of my improviser friends and I have been joking, we've been training for this moment our whole freaking lives. Like we are so comfortable when what hits the fan, right?
Yeah.
We're used to not having scripts on stage, and we are used to doing running the drills on those uncomfortable things a lot, which has made us, it's like built up our fear callus.
There's nothing scarier than improv. If you're listening to this and you have never tried improv, it is terrifying. And so I'm so thrilled that you had that training. What if we didn't? How can we begin to think more like that?
Totally. So the first thing we need to understand is that you will feel different fears based on who you are and what you're going through. Because when you're 20, you're going to fear very different things than when you're 40, right? And men and women process and internalize fears very differently. So based on and there are people right now, their industries are not impacted by COVID at all. They are not feeling the pain. Their bank accounts, right? Hashtag lucky you, right? There are people that aren't, and now maybe they're impacted because they can't travel. So again, we got to be careful about comparison, because what you're carrying is very different than what somebody else is carrying. But what you need to realize is that you'll never be able to outrun fear. And it seems that it's a waste of energy to do that. So why not start to take a look at it, befriend it? I mean, that's really what I mean when I talk about making fear your homeboy, and sort of invite fear into your life party so that you can take a look at it and see what it's there to teach you, what it's there to show you, and to see what it could be bubbling up for you. Because a lot of times when fear shows up, you're avoiding something. Like excuses are fear. Self-doubt is fear. Perfectionism, fear. Procrastination, fear. Self-sabotage, fear.
Can I interrupt you on the procrastination part? So for those of you joining us before this podcast, so Judi is one of the most systematic, organized, incredibly dynamic. I mean, she runs her business like a tight ship, and she comes from the meeting planning world. She comes from a place where timelines and deadlines mean the difference between life and death. And I'm very envious of that. And so I was giving her excuses earlier about why I was 10 minutes late running onto the prep for the tech check, and I couldn't find my lip gloss. And I was just being my usual scattery, Post-it notes flying everywhere self. And I said, I'm so sorry, Judi, I'm such a procrastinator. And she looked at me and said, well, procrastination is just fear in hiding. She said, what are you hiding from? And started started to unpack some serious things. I know you're not a doctor, but man, I feel like I was laying down on the couch for a second because it felt very personal. And I want to come back to the procrastination thing. But just quick pivot back to your book for 1 second. Yeah. So one of the things that I highlighted here in your book, we'll come back to putting me on the hot seat. It says, you said, fear cannot stand with faith. Yeah. Faith is way too strong. And that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Is the fact that right now in these times, I mean, if you're listening, a lot of my followers are talking about doubling down on spirituality, doubling down on that journaling, that gratitude practice, on filling up our cup in different at-home self-care ways, and it's just having faith that this too shall pass, and having faith that this is not happening to us but for us. So can you talk a little bit more about how fear cannot stand with faith, and how that kind of ties on to what you're talking about with, because if you're faithful, you don't have these excuses, you don't have the procrastination, you have faith that you're going to show up the way you should.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I mean when I write that fear can't stand with faith. And I'm talking about this deep rooted faith and belief and love in yourself. My first chapter is love yourself, because nothing works if you don't. So it's this idea that, because I really believe that's all confidence is. People are like, oh, you're so confident. She's so confident. How do you get so confident? I'm like, listen, all that means is that I believe and trust and love myself so much that if something happens, I know I'm going to be okay. And I know I'm going to figure it out because I'm a survivor. And I trust myself. And listen, the thing we need to understand, and please let this land, people will leave you. Companies will fire you. Economies will go up and down. Pandemics will change your life. We will lose people we love. It's going to happen. But the one constant in every single scenario is you. And the best bet you will ever make, ever, is on your damn self. And I don't care if you're a betting fear boss or not. You have to be thinking about that every day. And I think we're starting to live in an era, in a time where that middleman is going away. People are realizing that they can empower themselves, they can pick themselves, they can appoint themselves. And once you do this a couple of times, here's the tactical tool. You start to build confidence because you start to show yourself that you can do hard things and live to talk about it. And that's all the improv theater is. We do improv once, and then we do it again, and then we do it again, and then we do it again, and then we do it again. And the first time we suck, and it's embarrassing, and it's horrible, and we're nervous. And then the second time we just suck a little bit less, and it's still embarrassing and horrible and nervous, but then we keep going. And the more we do this, the more confident we get, because we're starting to Jedi mind trick ourselves that we can do hard things and that we can live to talk about it. And last point, when I see you do something brave, it gives me the confidence to go do something brave for myself. And that is contagious. And that is what the world needs more of right now. People that are brave enough to spread the good stuff and go do the brave things in order to move their life forward, instead of staying stuck in this, oh my God, poor me crap. That is a space that fear loves you to be in. So we can break that down. But yeah, I mean, it's about having a deep-rooted self-love and a deep-rooted belief in yourself. And that's all confidence is, that you've got it. You've got this.
Oh, that's so good, Judi. And I think what you touched on is something so interesting, is that this situation, and I know everyone's sick of pandemic talk, but it is something that we're talking about fear. and I feel like not acknowledging it, part of your book talks about acknowledging the elephant in the room, and it is the elephant in the room. And it's one of those things where, because a lot of us are sheltering in place, a lot of us are minimizing our social contact in certain ways, we start to feel a little bit isolated how we're creating, isolated from how we're operating. And it does begin to feel like you are sort of operating in a vacuum, even though you have the Zoom calls and the socials and all of the screen speak. Still, physically, we are not in a space, even live music in a bar or 10,000 people at a convention center, the physicality of that collectiveness we don't have right now. And so when you talk about looking at other people and talking about bringing them in to influence you and to kind of spread that contagiousness, how do you go about, investing in, how do you find those people? I mean, is it a conscious thing where you're okay, one day a week or one person a week? going to reach out, find someone that inspires me. And, you know, I mean, is it an intentional thing that you do, is to recruit members to your tribe? Or, I mean, that's an important thing, right? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think you have to be really mindful about who you're around, period, but especially now more than ever. And even back to what you said at the beginning, like, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. This is fear. Yeah, it's fear, yet I don't see it that way. I have changed the soundtrack in my head to go, this is opportunity. This is opportunity. This is a plot twist. I didn't see this coming. This is an opportunity. And yes, I'm scared. And yes, I feel fear, but I have stopped saying that, because the more we say that, the more we be it, the more we spread it, the more we become it. So it's those little subtle shifts. Those are little Jedi mind tricks fear uses to keep you stuck, right? This isn't fear. This is a moment. This is a space and time that sucks. But it's also a great opportunity to really make a choice of what comes next. And so I am, to answer your question, surrounding myself with like-minded people. And I really believe that if you want different outputs in your life, if you want braver outputs, if you want more opportunity, if you want more creative content, if you want a cooler business, if you want more money in your bank account, you got to mix up your inputs. If you are only following people that look like you and talk like you and think like you, if you are only reading things that are in your comfort zone and listening to things in your comfort zone, you will never have creative outputs. And so I guess the big answer to your question is, you know, if you want a different life, if you want a different business, if you want a different perspective on fear, if you want a different lens on this pandemic, you have to be willing to do things different. And that's going to require you to get a little uncomfortable, which is kind of awesome.
Yeah, right. Well, it's okay. So I love that there's so many things you're saying right now. So good. So we're talking about sort of a find and replace, and a sort of stop and a start. So what we're saying is, yes, we need to replace, attract more people into our life that can bring that abundance, that can bring that joy, that energy, that positivity, infectiousness. But also the flip side of that coin is sort of what you have on page 39 here on the book, where you say you're being mindful every time you become aware of where your attention is. So it's not just the people that we're spending time with, but it's also, like you're saying, the inputs that we're receiving, that we're downloading, and that we're digesting. And there's a lot happening right now when it comes to intentionality. How do we better become more intentional about where we put our attention? Not just who, but where. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. I love this. So I want to yes. So I want to put a disclaimer on right now, and I hope everybody watching and listening really receives this. I want you to know that your optimism right now does not deny that there is suffering in the world, okay? And your positivity does not mean that you don't recognize that there's pain in the world, okay? But what it does do is it allows you to stay sane, to stay healthy, and to stay in freaking forward momentum, which is the number one antidote to fighting and managing fear and to working with fear, right? And so if we want to fear less, we have to be moving forward, because bravery encourages a verb. You can't sit there and be brave. And so if you are watching this, if you are listening to this, and you feel shame or guilt around like being happy and being positive, maybe your business is doing good, maybe you're doing great things and you feel bad about it, stop that, because there are people who cannot get out of bed. There are people that hit the snooze button every morning. There are people that have lost their lives, and there are people that are not making it. So I am saying to you, if you have any joy to give in your heart, if you have any love, any light in your life, it is your duty to share it, because it will help someone who maybe can't muster it up for themselves. And that's the way I look at my optimism and my positivity. I'm an Enneagram 7. I can't help it. That's just the way I get through life. But I also know that there are times me being joyful and me keeping things in forward momentum and me not going down the dark hole rabbit hole is really helping someone move throughout their day. So that's number one. Let yourself off the hook. Like, your positivity doesn't mean that you don't realize there's pain, you know?
We have to unpack this for a second before you move on. I'm so sorry. Okay, so that is a huge point, because I think a lot of the people that I work with, my clients, they feel they're in this kind of like posting paralysis because they're afraid of sharing positivity because they feel like it's not appropriate. So whether it's sales where they don't want to offer opportunity because they feel like they're looking opportunistic, or whether it's marketing yourself and your business is booming but you feel like it's not appropriate because there's all this civil unrest and there's bigger things to talk about than your new book or your new podcast or your new whatever. So I love the idea that you're giving us permission to allow positivity and reality to coexist.
Yes.
You're allowing them to be in the same arena. And I think that's huge. And I would say that there is sort of an empowerment factor. Like, what would you share with people who have become more voyeuristic in the social media landscape, for example, because they're just like, I'm just going to watch this dumpster fire go down. I'm afraid to get in the arena. You know what I mean? And so there is, because there's a feeling of you know, I don't want to share my joy. Like, my joy is someone else's pain. So how do we, what is the headspace? And I think we've actually discussed this in the past. Like, what is the headspace people listening need to get in to feel empowered and brave to show up as themselves, and knowing that people it might be the wrong time of day or the wrong place in the Corona coaster, wherever they are in their journey, you're rubbing them the wrong way, but it has less to do with you and more to do with them. Like, let's talk about that a little bit.
Ooh, I am like chomping at the bit right now. I'm sweating. Okay, you guys ready for this one? Yes, let's talk about this. I think this is what holds us back. I mean, and one of the things I think that ticks me off, I don't know if I can curse here. I was going to say, you know, pisses me off, but like
it's a brand new podcast. There's no rules, so I guess we'll figure them out.
In the fear boss syndrome, I won't drop any F-bombs, I promise. Come to my podcast for that. But like, seriously, one of the things that pisses me off so bad is people being shamed for being themselves, or people being shamed for spreading their joy and being a light. And I hate that so much, because like I said, I believe if you have something good to give and you're doing it with love and you're serving, we need that now more than ever. But here's the big thing that we need to this is the mindset shift that will literally drop the mic and make you braver when you think about putting yourself out there. We get so worried. And I know we've talked about this, Arent, so the second I say it, you're going to know it. We get so worried about people not liking us, people judging us, people making fun of us and all this stuff. So we play it safe. We stay in our comfort zone. We do things the same way we've always done them because this is the way we do them. And so we don't want people, we don't want to get fired. All the stuff. We don't want to be judged. And so we just play small. And here's the cold, hard truth. And I hate to break it to you. This is some tough fear boss love. But people already don't like you. People are already judging you right now. And people are already making fun of you. So the question is, first of all, can I get an amen in the comments if you are living on that? So so the question is, who are you living your life for? Who are you running your business for? Who are you in your marriage for? Who are you raising your kids for? You or everybody else? And the other thing I love, Arent, and this sits so big in my office, is this. If they're already talking, let's give them something to talk about. Let's give them something to talk about.
Let's give them something to talk about. Right. So good. Judi, that is so, oh my gosh. I mean, it's so good. I mean, we even had a hater in the comments, and I was going to block him, and I was like, yeah, let him do it once. Yeah, who cares? Some random dude from wherever, who cares? But I think I love that people are, it's like, haters are going to hate, and people are going to do what they want to do. And I think that what I want to understand a little bit more is, okay, yes, we're going to show up. Yes, we're going to be who we want. Yes, we're going to do all these things. But what I want to talk about is how does that impact our fear experiments? How does that impact, because fear experiments are something you talk about in your book a lot, where it's like, okay, try to do something small or medium brave that puts you out of your comfort zone. What if for some people that is just getting out of bed? What if for some people that is doing something just small? Is there a fear experiment that's too small, basically? And how can we rethink about fear experiments when all the things feel trickier?
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. So yes, I love that we're talking about fear experiments. This is really the big idea behind all of my work on fear. And this is really the big actionable takeaway that'll make a massive difference in your life today. And I'm going to give you all a homework assignment. I think we have everybody conduct their first fear experiment. So let's break it down. By the end of the day today, everybody has to do their first fear experiment. And you and I technically are. This is, just so you know, a fear experiment for me. I've done a ton of podcasts. I work as a speaker. I have a podcast. I do video. But this is my first like live video podcast, live stream to all the things situation. So I'm uncomfortable, which is awesome because it means I'm getting braver, Erin. So that's a fear experiment. So let's talk about this. I'm going to invite everybody right now to become a fear scientist with Erin and I, and we are going to begin experimenting with our fear every day on purpose. And the goal of conducting fear experiments is to help you get braver. And what I love about this idea of thinking about yourself as like a fear scientist, just like experimenting with your fear, is it removes like the gross stuff. It removes like the fear and the overwhelm and the stress and the anxiety out of any new thing you're trying to do. And it welcomes in more confidence and creativity and play and courage, because if you are just experimenting with this podcast video, if you are just experimenting with the new class, if you are just experimenting with your first Instagram live, you can't really F it up because it's just an experiment. So fear experiments could be big things like leaving a toxic relationship, getting married, having a kid, not having kids, getting divorced, starting a business, moving to a new city. All of these massive, big, life-changing fear experiments.
But like teaching kids from home. I mean, let's talk
becoming
about that.
homeschooling children.
Oh, God.
Figuring out how to
bless
keep
you,
your business
bless
alive.
you.
Yeah,
bless you,
keeping your
parents.
business alive through COVID. All of the things that we're going through right now are big fear experiments, right? But like I said earlier, you don't need to jump out of a plane or like free solo Mount Everest to be brave. You can do small everyday things. So Erin, yeah, for some of us, not hitting snooze is a damn fear experiment because we are going through a lot. Maybe it's wearing a color you're not used to, or when everybody else shows up in suits, you rock the sequin. Maybe it's eating a new food or cooking something different for dinner, or like I did the other day, because it's so crazy in COVID, taking a new drive to the grocery store, maybe it's listening to reading biographies instead of fiction. Anytime you are getting a little bit uncomfortable is an experiment with your fear, and this will naturally help you begin to fear your fear less. It's kind of like going to the gym. These are weights at the gym that are making you stronger.
So it's kind of like establishing a routine that helps you to break your routine?
Yeah. And to add to that, what I do every night as a part of my little journal, and sometimes it's in the morning if I miss my journaling, like if I have a little too much rosé or we go out to dinner and I don't do my journaling at night, like I'll do it in the morning. But once a day I'm doing something for myself. But I always am asking myself, usually 99% of the times at the end of the day, I'm like this: how did I get uncomfortable today? What were my fear experiments today? Did I get uncomfortable? Because here's what happens. People come to me all day long from the Fear Boss community. And they're like, I'm in a rut in my marriage. I'm in a rut in my business. My friendship is in a rut. I'm in a rut creatively. I'm just in a rut. I'm feeling uninspired. And my automatic responder is, have you gotten uncomfortable lately? When was the last time you did something different? When was the last time you did something for the first time? Like, I said to my husband the other day, I go, what we need to do is take a blanket, because we're in quarantine. We have been together for 145 days. I said to my husband, I'm like, well, we're going to get a blanket. Let's go put it out in our front yard and make a little picnic and bring our wine and sit in the front yard. And hell, let's turn on like the sprinklers to make it feel like we're on like vacation, right?
Yeah.
To like turn on a water feature, like just trying to have fun and mix it up. Like it's easy to eat in our kitchen. It's easy to eat out. But it's different to do something like that. And it's a little uncomfortable. And we'd be like, hey, but that's a fear experiment. And if you want a relationship, you have to do things different. If you want a different business, you have to get uncomfortable. And so I just share that story to inspire.
I love that story. It's so good. So let's talk about, so I love that so much. Let's talk about all the things you're saying, which is like, go for it, do it, be it. What if the fear is a healthy fear?
Yeah.
For example, you talk about the saber-toothed tiger in your book, where the classic fear example of the reason that we're scared of things is because as cavemen, if we weren't afraid of the saber-toothed tiger, we would be his lunch. And so we still have these genetically caveman programmed things in us, right, to protect us from. That's why we're here, is because our predecessors were scared of scary things. So when the saber-toothed tiger is extinct, but COVID is not, and now it's the saber-toothed disease, how do we draw that line in the sand between healthy fear and unhealthy fear? And how do we navigate a world where everyone's fear threshold and fear tolerance right now is really different? Because I don't know about you, but I'm sure people that are listening, we've all had these uncomfortable conversations with friends and family and neighbors and clients and everyone who's at a different place in this fear journey. So how do we decide if it's healthy or unhealthy? And then secondly, how do we manage those relationships where maybe my tolerance for or threshold for fear is higher or lower than the ones that I love?
Yeah. So let's start with the second question first. And because I feel like I have a quick response to that one. And this is, I don't know if it's the right answer, but it's how I'm dealing with it, because you're right.
Yeah.
There's so many people I love that are, everybody's handling what's going on in the world very differently. And it's very easy to be like pissed off or resentful or to judge, right? Like,
Yes.
how could you ever get on a plane? Or someone could look at me and go, like, she's getting on a plane, like whatever it may be. So there's a lot of that going on. And what I'm
Yes.
doing to stay sane in that, I don't know if this is the right answer, but for me, I'm just focusing on my world. Like, okay, what can I control today? Because I can't
Yes.
control other people, places, and or things. I'll never be able to. My dad has been going into work. He's 75 years old, and he has been going into work every day since
Bless
COVID.
him.
And I could tell him I will pay all of his bills and never have to work again. And my dad's like, I'm still going into work, right? And so why am I going to waste my energy trying to change someone else's opinion or mind? And all I can do is love them through it, right? And try and take deep breaths. So I just really focus on myself, because I can't control other people, places, or things. And I know I'll lose my mind if I try to. And again, I have this thing where I'm doing unfollow Fridays. So I've been getting rid of stuff in my feed, either hiding or unfollowing, that just doesn't feel joyful or positive or supportive of sort of
Yeah.
where I'm in my life. And so I'm just really careful about my inputs, don't watch a lot of crap. And I just am trying to do things that bring me joy so that I
Yeah.
don't obsess about what everybody else is doing, because it's really hard. It's easy to get
It
really,
is.
yeah.
It is. And, speaking of what you kind of are taking in as an input, I saw this great post on Instagram the other day, and it was talking about the debate about, homeschooling and sending kids to school, which is like the hottest topic right now for all of our friends and our moms. And it's like, everyone's like, do I send them? Do I not send them? How am I going to do this from home? I mean, and it's all really rooted in the fear of what would happen to their kids, the fear of what's happening to their personal lives with their kids not going, the fear if their kids do go. I mean, these are fear conversations that are transpiring. And the Instagram post said something like, here's the response that you give to every single person. So let's say the mom wants to keep her kids home and homeschool them. The response is, wow, that must have been a really hard decision for you.
I love that.
Good for you. And then it was like, okay, this is to the mom who's sending her kids off to school. Wow, that must have been a really hard decision for you. Good for you. And it goes through all the different types of moms, and every response is like, wow, that must have been a really hard decision for you.
Yeah.
Because everyone's fear threshold is different. I mean, and I know even with some of my dearest friends, they'd look to me like, you're crazy for how strict you are with your quarantining. Other friends of mine, I talked to my friend James Taylor this morning, who's in Scotland with his wife Allison. They had not seen another human being. They're out in like the Highlands of Scotland in their cottage with a food storage, and they haven't seen a soul in person since this thing started. And then you have other friends that are, I had a girlfriend that her wedding was pushed off, and so she had her honeymoon early in Cabo. They went to Cabo. I didn't know you could go to Mexico right now, but apparently you can. So it's like, this is the spectrum. And I think that the question for you is, how, for us personally, if we're going to say, okay, everyone do you and do your best navigating that landscape with what feels right for you, how do we do a better job making sure that the fears we have are saber-toothed tiger, like COVID person coughing on you fear, versus the stories that we're telling ourselves in our mind, the narratives that we're creating and that we're imagining that we're going down this crazy black rabbit hole that's not even real, because it's just this thing we're making up. I call it when I go to crazy town. It's like, going to crazy town, going to this really silly place of being a nutcase. So, I mean, how do we know if it's a healthy fear or an unhealthy fear?
Yeah, totally. So it goes back to this, and I loved that was the response. Like, wow, that must have been a hard decision. I think acknowledging how the guts it takes to do hard things is a beautiful way to really see someone. We're doing that all the time in our business. And I do that a lot of my social media comments where we get to hear about so many different fear experiments people are conducting and big changes people are making. And whether it's something we maybe personally agree with or not, we're like, wow, you know, that must have been a really hard decision, or wow, that took a lot of guts, or wow, I can imagine how hard that was. And I think this is just such a beautiful way to respond to people with grace and love. So that's number one. And number two, I think it comes back to addressing where we kind of began, which is the word fearless. I think this is why so many of us get worried or not worried. I think this is why we get confused and maybe worried and anxious, because I think we have to be fearless, and we don't. Because we don't want you to be fearless. Because if you were really fearless, you would do all kinds of crazy stuff. You would go hang out right now with someone that has COVID. You would eat poisonous foods. You would walk into traffic. You would do all kinds. You would at 4 a.m. go into the middle of a big city and walk down a dark alley alone at night by yourself. So no, we don't want you to be fearless. Your fear can keep you safe. It can keep you out of harm's way. And Elizabeth Gilbert, if you don't know who she is, she's written a ton of books, but she wrote a really great book called Big Magic. And in that book, she wrote something that I loved so much. She says, listen, the only fearless people I know are 5-year-olds and sociopaths. So like, we don't want you to be a sociopath, and we don't want to be 5 again. So the goal is brave. The goal is figuring out how to fear your fear just a little bit less. And yes, there are fears that are going to keep you safe, but it always comes back to the regret meter, the fear meter. If you regret, I mean, I have someone on my team right now that is her very best friend of life. Her mom is in hospice and is going to be dying, and there will be hundreds of people at this funeral. And she is really nervous about how to honor that relationship. And so it comes back to regret. Like, what will you regret at the end of this experience for yourself? Like, what's going to allow you to lay your head on the pillow tonight and the rest of your nights to know that you did the right thing either way? And that is your choice to make. No one else can carry that for you. And that is a hard choice to make. And everybody's going through stuff like that right now, even with COVID and outside of COVID. So we just got to remember, the goal isn't fearless. The goal is to just avoid regret and be a little bit braver than you were yesterday. And the more you do this, the better you get at it, I promise. So you've got to be getting uncomfortable. And then these things, and honestly, last thing I'll say is, once you get brave, you start to succeed. There is no luck. There's just courage. And you'll start to live this really badass life that you'll be so in the clouds with what you have going on that you don't see the shit. You don't see, oops, I just did it again. So I can't help myself. You don't see.
I mean, my mom's in the comments. Other than that, we're fine.
Sorry, Mom. Like, I think courage is like the best shit shield. Like, it's a poop shield. Like, when you are brave, when you love yourself, when you are so in deep with what you have going on, you don't look around as much. And it's not because you don't love other people. It means you're so focused on what you've got going on that you're either adding to your life in a positive way, or you're making something happen for yourself. And I think that's just a beautiful way to stay out of fear and in action. So again, it kind of goes back to loving yourself and just trusting that, dude, you're right where you're meant to be. And hard stuff can be gold just as much as it can be hard.
Well, it's so true, Judi. And I think, I'm probably thinking the same thing that everyone listening is thinking, which is like, how did she get like this? How did she get to love herself so much and be so confident? And I just want to say, I know for a fact, I will verify to everyone listening that you do not just wake up like this. You do the work.
I do not.
You read the quotes. You do those affirmation cards. You do the posting. You do your Post-it notes with your Go Girl messaging that you read right there.
Here's another one. This is my big one lately. You don't get what you don't ask for. So this is like when I'm on a call, I'm like, dude, just ask for the money. Ask for what you want. Ask for it. Ask for the interview. Like, ask send the video DM. That is reminding me to get uncomfortable every day, because think about it. You really don't get what you don't ask for.
It's so true. But everyone listening, I think a lot of times they hear someone like you and like, oh, I could never be like that. Yes, you can. Judi puts in the work. It's a muscle that she's like a personal trainer of bravery. Yes. She puts in the reps every day. I mean, you really do. So you're awesome. Okay. So other question here on page 19. and this is the thing I want to kind of circle back and close the loop on my earlier quick alluding to our conversation prior to this recording. Page 19 says the only way you can stop procrastination is with action. Now, we are in a time where I am talking to my community about the waiters versus the creators. There are people that are waiting and people that are creating. And on LinkedIn yesterday, this guy said, is that a trick question? Of course we're creating. And I said, it's actually not a trick question, because every single day, if I had $1 for every time someone said, when this is over, when things go back to normal, when there's a vaccine, when, people are still having a waiter. I'm a reformed waiter mindset. I had a waiter mindset until maybe about 2 months ago. And to really like embrace this creative side of, we're going to create what works now. I mean, we're doing a new website. It's all virtual. You know, we're doing the new course and the new book and the new podcast. And it's like, let's just create our way out of this, right? Let's create until we don't feel nostalgic and mournful for the before times. And so I want to talk about that passage about when you said the reason you're procrastinating on this podcast, Arent, is because it's rooted in fear. You shot me in the heart like a verbal arrow. So if anyone is listening to this and you found yourself procrastinating about what I'm going to do when all this is over, or you found yourself procrastinating about anything in this time, apparently that's coming from fear.
Yeah, it is. Question.
Not anymore.
Good, because I was coughing and I was like, I hope they don't hear me coughing.
That's okay. I'll edit that out for the audio.
And it goes down the wrong pipe. I'm like, I'm going to mute my mic and see if this works. So this is one of the big things from the improv theater. We always say no mistakes, only gifts. So that's another thing. You know, that takes guts. A lot of people would be like, oh my God, I'm coughing on a live interview. What do I do? I'm just going to hide and run away and I'm over. Like, no, okay, great. I coughed on a podcast. Okay, I'll figure it out. Okay. Like no mistakes, only gifts. And I think showing, and then here's the gift, me having that moment shows everybody else watching that you can have moments like this and live to talk about it and get back on track. So many of us stop when things get weird. We just got to keep going, right? So to come back to your thing about procrastination, yes. So we get on this podcast and Arent is like, oh my God, one thing you may not know, you may or may not know this, but I'm such a procrastinator. I got stuff everywhere and all this stuff. And I was like, you know, that's fear, girl. That is, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of?
I feel so attacked.
Yes, here's the thing. And I'm not saying I procrastinate. Certainly there are times I procrastinate but here's the difference. I know I know what it is. I know when procrastination shows up. I go, oh, hi, fear. You are back. You are back again, my friend. You are so good at your job. Do you ever take a day off? I don't think you do. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate you keeping me safe, especially when I'm out there driving around my neighborhood and all these crazy teenagers are everywhere. But right now, I need to work fear, so I need you to leave me alone. I love you, but go, right? So like I have conversations like this.
Do you have literal conversation? Do you literally?
Yes.
Let's get crazy. Okay, like do you literally talk to your fear like it's a being?
Yes. Oh my God, of course. I'm like,
no, because it's not obvious to everyone. Like I would never think to like separate
all these. Yes.
This is so good. So you almost like separate your fear. It's almost like here's Judi, and then Judi's fear is not part of her. It's like a separate. Okay, I love this. Go on.
About this. Yes, think about this. Like you say, for example, you get sick, the flu, COVID. You have the flu, but you aren't the flu. You may have a headache, but you aren't the headache. You may have anxiety, but you aren't anxiety. You may feel some fear, but you aren't fear. And so the way I've struggled with anxiety and depression my entire life. Like this is rooted in my family way before. I think everybody's got anxiety right now, but mental health has been at the forefront of my life for as long as I can remember. My mother's manic bipolar. We don't have a relationship. And because of that, I've had to protect myself like a boss for a really long time. And I take it very seriously. And so one of the ways that I've been able to separate myself from really scary, uncomfortable things is to sort of put it in that box and to have those conversations. So when fear shows up, I can talk to it. I can honor it. I can thank it for being there to remind me that I'm alive, to keep me alive and to keep me moving my body and investing investing in all the things that keep me living my dreams. But it's, it's not here to drive. It's not here to operate the switches. And it's not the DJ on the turntable running the ones and twos. Now, the fear can tell me what records to play and what kind of club we're going to tonight. And if we're going to do a DJ analogy here, I don't know where I'm going with that analogy, but you get the point. Fear can never spin the records. I spin the records. I drive the car. And so for me, putting fear in a little bit of a box and having physical conversation has been helpful. So when I see procrastination, Arent, I'm like, okay, what am I afraid of? And what am I putting off? Because when you do the thing, you could succeed. And if you succeed, Arent, you'll change. And when you change, you're going to be a different version of yourself, a version of yourself that fear may not need anymore. And then where does fear go? Where does it go? And this also applies to people. There are going to be people that do not understand your dreams, that do not support your dreams, that do not want to see you succeed, because you changing, you growing, you succeeding means you're now a new version of yourself. And will you need them as much? This is why women get into these when you're in these like controlling relationships, men and women, right? Like, and someone wants to lose the weight or quit the bad habit or start the business. People get mad and nervous because they want them to stay small, because if they change and grow, well, then will you need me? Will I still be in your life? And it's a fear-based reaction, And so I have hundreds of examples of this and how it manifests in my life, but that's just one way to unpack this procrastination thing. Because Arent, if you do it, you're going to change and grow. And it's the why, that's what's really behind it. What does it mean?
Okay, so my knee-jerk reaction is to make a joke about Bridesmaids with Annie and Helen, who are like, I don't know if people change. Do they? Are they really changing? Are they growing? That whole scene from Bridesmaids is my knee-jerk joke reaction, because I feel so attacked on that. I feel so attacked in the best possible way. Like, I feel seen, and that is something I'm on a couch right now, and I'm gonna need to lay down later and really process that. But I want to just go with your DJ analogy for a second. Record scratch right now. What is, people that are listening, if they start to feel the fear creeping in, what is your go-to record scratch, drop the mic phrase that you tell fear that is your go-to when you're feeling scary, you're talking to fear and telling fear to leave you the F alone? Is there a phrase that our listeners can try maybe this afternoon or tomorrow when they feel the fear creeping in, they can stop and say, hey, now I know what this is. This isn't me. This is a separate entity. And then what would they say? Would be like the mic drop, record scratch, mic drop kind of comment.
Yeah. For me, it is always these two words, and you're not going to see it coming. And fear doesn't see it coming either. This is why it's beautiful. And it's thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
Because it reminds me I'm alive. If I wasn't, I think of going on a keynote stage. There are 3 things I do for every stage, right? I power pose, get my vibe raised. I listen to some Sia, Unstoppable by Sia. It's like my jam. And then the third thing I do is I say, thank you. Thank you for the gift of living this dream, for the gift of being able to serve in this way, for the gift of doing this work, and for keeping me alive long enough to be able to do it. And these nerves in my body, the sweat I'm feeling, my heart that's racing, all of it is reminding me that I'm very much alive. Now, what am I going to go do with that honor? What am I going to go do with this honor? Right? And so that is what I do with my fear. And it's fear never sees it coming, because fear wants you to go, get away. Now, you'll see me post on social media. I see you, fear, keep walking. I just did an Instagram reel about beat it. Me singing to Michael Jackson, telling fear, beat it, right? And of course, we want to stand up to fear because we're the boss. Yet we want to be grateful for all the times it keeps us safe and alive and healthy and smart. So it's a bit of a dance, and it just depends on your situation.
Well, that is just the most incredible, I think, grateful reframing of fear that we should probably end with, because I want to say thank you for that awesome phrase of thank you. I mean, that is powerful. I mean, even just because I thought you were going to say F you.
Yeah.
I was
a very cute thing to say.
I was expecting F you. I was expecting something aggressive and battling it. And so when people say don't fight your fear, when you say don't fight your fear, embrace your fear, don't fight your fear, friend your fear, I mean, you would say thank you to a friend, not a foe. And that is totally flipping it on its head. It's so good. So I think for anyone watching, the next time you feel fear, today, tomorrow, this week, one day at a time during this journey. Let's remember this moment with Judi, and let's hashtag thank it, and move on and do you. And I just, I know that there is so much that people can gain from following you on social media. I mean, this is just a quick taste of the Judi Holler awesomeness that I've experienced firsthand. And so check her out on social media at Judi Holler. Her book, Fear is My Homeboy, I cannot recommend it enough. She has a new workbook out called The Fear Boss Project, which is
I got it here.
And this is a really great way, there it is. And this is a great way, Judi, right, for people to be able to actually pen to paper, make those breakthroughs, journal it out, journal it into existence. It's almost like having Judi in your house with you, kind of holding your hand through your journey of evolution. So check that out. Last question for you, Judi. Tell us if there was one nonfiction author that you are jamming on right now, or that is a go-to for you besides Liz Gilbert, who you think would be great on this podcast. Who would you say it would be?
Oh, a nonfiction author. Oh my God, do you know Vanessa Van Edwards?
No.
She's one of my favorite human beings. I'm obsessed with her. We've gotten to become friends and have collaborated on a couple of things recently, and I would love to make that introduction. Her book, Captivate, I referenced it in my book when I talk about conversation sparkers, asking different questions. She's all about triggering. She's an introvert and she studies people. She's a recovering awkward person. And so she's like a people scientist. And I referenced her conversation sparkers in my book. Her book, Captivate, is one of my favorite nonfiction books. Her people school is amazing. She's really fun to follow, and you'd have a great conversation with her. So I'd love to make, and you've got a lot of great, I see you've got Means here. Tammy Evans has been here. We've had some badass authors here today with us, and I know you'll have them on.
Yes, they are. They'll be on the podcast. They're my she-noters. They are fantastic. Yes. Oh my gosh, Judi, well, you are such a light and such a hope. And, just listening to, I love how you give us the 30,000 foot view, but then you give us something tangible. I mean, thank you. And I'll be saying thank you to my procrastination and my fear going forward to help be braver and bolder, thanks to you. So
loved being here. Thanks for having me.
Take care, Judi. Thanks again.
Bye.